How much of yourself would you give to save the person you love? Amaka didn't expect her ordinary life to be rewritten by a stranger's quiet smile. Yet, as she knelt on the hospital floor months later, clutching Kene's trembling hand, she knew their love had always been destined for sacrifice. Amaka Nwankwo was a 28-year-old vibrant and determined woman, working as a visual assistant at a tech company in Bromley, London. She was known for her creativity and meticulous attention to detail, always turning abstract ideas into vivid presentations. Her deep brown skin glowed under the sunlight, and her warm almond-shaped eyes sparkled with curiosity. She wore her natural curls proudly, often styled into neat buns or cascading down her shoulders. Despite her petite frame, Amaka carried herself with a confidence that could fill any room. She came from a close-knit family who adored her, though they often worried about her tendency to put others before herself. Amaka was the kind of person who would sacrifice her comfort to ensure those around her were happy. She believed in the power of love and the strength of loyalty, values deeply rooted in her Igbo upbringing. Kene Kene Okafor, on the other hand, was a 30-year-old reserved and introspective man. A civil engineer by profession, he had spent years building a reputation for precision and reliability. Standing tall and lean with caramel-toned skin, Kene possessed a quiet charisma that often drew people to him. His deep-set eyes carried the weight of unspoken stories, and his neatly trimmed hair added to his clean-cut appearance. Kene was fiercely independent, a trait shaped by his early struggles. Losing his father at a young age forced him to take on responsibilities that hardened him in some ways but softened him in others. Welcome to Tearful Tales, where we dig into the stories that touches the soul. Here, you'll find tales of heartbreak, loss, and resilience, narrative that echo the raw emotions of life and remind us of our shared humanity. Each story is a window into moments of sorrow, but also a journey of strength and reflection. Prepare to feel, reflect, and connect with the profound beauty in life's most vulnerable moments. Please subscribe, and turn on post notifications. It was a crisp Saturday morning in the heart of London, and the Nigerian diaspora community had gathered at the local cultural centre for a charity event aimed at supporting underprivileged children back home. Amaka, one of the lead organizers, moved briskly through the crowd, her bright Ankara print head wrap making her impossible to miss. Everyone, please grab a box. We need these supplies sorted and packed before noon, she called out, her voice cutting through the lively chatter. Amaka was in her element, organizing with precision and charm, but her sharp eyes quickly caught sight of someone standing awkwardly by the snack table. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and looked entirely out of place in his designer hoodie and spotless white sneakers. She approached with a smile, holding out a pair of gloves. "Hi there, new face. Care to join the action, or are you planning to supervise?" Kene blinked, caught off guard by her directness. "Oh, I'm just waiting for my cousin. He told me this was a small gathering, not an entire festival." Amaka chuckled, noting his hesitant tone. "Well, welcome to a proper Nigerian event. We never do anything small. Here." She handed him a box of supplies. "Consider yourself recruited." With a sigh of resignation, Kene took the box and followed her to one of the sorting tables. "So, what exactly are we doing here?" he asked, glancing around at the bustling room. "Packing school supplies and medical kits for kids in rural communities back home," Amaka explained, deftly arranging items into a neat pile. "It's a cause close to my heart." Kene raised an eyebrow. "You do this often?" "As often as I can," Amaka replied without looking up. "Living abroad doesn't mean we forget where we come from. Every little bit helps." Her words struck a chord with Kene, who had spent most of his years abroad focused on building his career and little else. "That's commendable," he said after a pause. "Most people just send money and call it a day." Amaka finally looked at him, a spark of curiosity in her eyes. "And you? Are you one of those people?" Kene chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "Guilty as charged. My cousin practically dragged me here today." "Well, you're here now," Amaka said with a shrug. "And trust me, the kids will appreciate the effort." As they worked side by side, Kene found himself relaxing. Amaka's energy was infectious, and her easy banter made the time fly by. She teased him about his careful packing technique, and he countered with witty comebacks that made her laugh. "You're surprisingly decent at this," she said, nudging him playfully. "Don't sound so shocked," he replied, feigning offense. "I can be useful when I want to be." By the end of the day, the boxes were packed, the hall was tidied, and the volunteers began trickling out. Kene lingered, helping Amaka stack the remaining supplies in a corner. "Thanks for the recruitment," he said, his tone sincere. "I actually enjoyed this." Amaka raised an eyebrow. "Enjoyed? That's a strong word." "Are you sure?" He laughed. "All right, maybe didn't completely hate is more accurate." She shook her head, smiling. "Well, I'll take it. Maybe you'll come back next time?" Kene shrugged, his smile softening. "If you're running it, I just might." As they stepped out into the chilly evening air, their conversation flowed effortlessly. Neither of them realized it then, but this unplanned encounter marked the beginning of something unexpected and extraordinary. Their relationship grew quickly, fueled by shared ambitions and mutual respect. They spent weekends exploring art exhibits, brainstorming ideas for Amaka's projects, and laughing over bad coding jokes that only Kene found funny. "I still don't understand how you find joy in staring at lines of code all day," Amaka teased one evening, sprawled on Kene's couch with her laptop. "And I don't get how you obsess over the perfect shade of blue for hours," Kene shot back with a grin. "It's called branding, Kene," she said, throwing a cushion at him. "You mean overthinking," he replied, dodging the cushion and laughing. Their relationship blossomed despite their different worlds. They quickly became inseparable, sharing late-night conversations, dreams of the future, and a bond so deep it felt unshakable. Kene admired Amaka's passion and saw the world through her eyes, while Amaka found solace in Kene's steady presence and gentle humor. Together, they painted a future filled with dreams of travel, family, and growing old together. They were, as everyone around them said, perfect for each other. One rainy evening at Amaka's apartment, Amaka lit a few candles, and they sat on the floor, sharing stories from their childhoods. "You fell out of a tree trying to impress a girl?" Amaka asked, laughing so hard she nearly spilled the tea in her hands. "Don't remind me," Kene groaned, though he was smiling. "It was the most embarrassing moment of my life." "Until now," Amaka teased, sticking her tongue out at him. Little did they know, the strength of their bond would soon be tested in ways they could never have imagined. One afternoon, as Amaka prepared their favorite meal in the kitchen, she heard the sound of something crashing to the floor. Rushing into the living room, she found Kene slumped on the ground, gasping for breath. "Kene," she cried, dropping to her knees beside him. "I'm fine," he managed, though his voice was weak. "No, you're not," she said firmly, helping him to the couch. "This isn't just stress, Kene. You need to see a doctor." After weeks of tests, they finally received the diagnosis: chronic kidney disease. The doctor explained the severity of his condition, how his kidneys were functioning at a fraction of their capacity, and how dialysis or a transplant would be his only options moving forward. Kene sat silently as the words sank in, his usually calm demeanor replaced with quiet despair. Amaka reached for his hand, her heart breaking at the sight of the man she loved reduced to this fragile state. "We'll get through this," she said, squeezing his hand. Kene turned to her, his eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't have to go through this with me, Amaka. You deserve someone healthy, someone who can give you the life you deserve." "I deserve you," she replied without hesitation. "And I'm not going anywhere." Dialysis became a part of Kene's routine, but it was a grueling process. Amaka accompanied him to every session, sitting by his side as the machine worked to filter his blood. She held his hand during the long hours, distracting him with stories about her day. "You don't have to be here every time," Kene said one day, his voice tinged with guilt. "I want to be here," she replied. "You're not doing this alone." Despite her unwavering support, Kene struggled with feelings of inadequacy. He hated how the illness had taken over his life, how it had turned him into someone who needed constant care. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, he finally voiced his fears. "I feel like a burden, Amaka," he admitted, staring out at the city lights. "You shouldn't have to take care of me like this." "You're not a burden," she said, placing a hand on his knee. "You're the man I love. That hasn't changed." "But what if I can't give you the future we planned?" he asked, his voice breaking. Amaka knelt in front of him, forcing him to meet her gaze. "The future I want is one where you're alive, Kene. That's all that matters to me." But the physical toll of the illness wasn't the only battle Kene faced. The emotional weight of his diagnosis began to wear him down, and he withdrew from the people who cared about him most. He stopped answering calls from friends and family, retreating further into himself. Amaka tried to reach him, but he built walls she couldn't always break through. "Talk to me, Kene," she pleaded one night as he sat silently on the couch. "There's nothing to say," he replied, his voice flat. "There's everything to say," she countered, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't have to go through this alone." "I already am," he said quietly. Amaka felt helpless, watching the man she loved slip further away. She knew the illness wasn't just attacking his body, it was attacking his spirit, too. But no matter how distant he became, she refused to give up on him. When the doctors mentioned the possibility of a transplant, a flicker of hope appeared on Kene's face for the first time in months. But as they explained the challenges of finding a donor, that hope dimmed once more. "You'll find someone," Amaka said later that evening as they walked out of the hospital. Kene shook his head. "It could take years, Amaka. I don't have that kind of time." "You'll find someone," she repeated, determination in her voice. Amaka got tested to see if she could be a donor. When she found out she was a match, she told Kene immediately. "You're not doing this," he said, his tone firm but his eyes filled with fear and love. "I am," she replied. "This isn't just your fight, Kene. It's ours. And I'll do whatever it takes to save you." Amaka's decision to donate her kidney to Kene sent shockwaves through her family. It began the moment she sat her parents down in their cozy living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. "You're doing what?" her mother, Ngozi, asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and fear. "I'm donating my kidney to Kene," Amaka said firmly, her hands clasped in her lap. "He's running out of time and I'm a match." Her father, Chief Obi, leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Amaka, do you understand what you're saying? This isn't like giving someone a few naira. This is your body we're talking about." "I know what I'm doing, Dad," Amaka replied. "The doctors have explained everything. I've thought this through." Ngozi shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You're too young to make this kind of decision. What if something goes wrong during the surgery? What if you can't live a normal life after this? And what if Kene doesn't make it without my help?" Amaka countered, her voice breaking. "That's not your responsibility," Ngozi cried. "You've only been with him for a year, Amaka. You're not married. What if this love doesn't last? What if he leaves you after you've given up so much for him?" Amaka flinched at her mother's words, but she held her ground. "Kene isn't like that. He loves me. And I love him." Her father sighed heavily, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Love or not, this is reckless. You're gambling with your health, with your future. What if one day you need that kidney? Have you thought about that?" "I have," Amaka said softly. "And I still want to do this." The conversation spiraled into heated arguments over the next few days. Her parents tried everything to dissuade her, calm reasoning, emotional appeals, and even outright forbidding her from going through with it. One evening, her elder sister, Ada, joined the family intervention. "Amaka," Ada began gently, "I know you love Kene, but Mom and Dad are right. This is too much. You have your whole life ahead of you. What if you meet someone else one day? Someone who doesn't come with this kind of burden?" Amaka stared at her sister, her jaw tightening. "This isn't about meeting someone else, Ada. This is about Kene. The man I love. He's not a burden, he's my partner. And what if he doesn't stay your partner? Ada pressed. What if something changes after the surgery? What if he leaves you? Amaka's voice rose, filled with frustration. I can't make decisions based on what ifs. What I do know is that Kene is dying, and I can help him. If I don't, I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. Her mother broke down in tears. Amaka, please, she begged. Think of us. Think of how we'd feel if something happened to you. Mom, Amaka said, kneeling beside her mother and taking her hands. I have thought about it. But I need to do this. For Kene, for me. Please try to understand. Despite her pleas, the resistance continued. Her father even tried to involve their pastor, hoping spiritual counsel would sway her. Amaka, the pastor said one Sunday after service, your parents are worried about you. They want what's best for you. I know they mean well, Pastor, Amaka said patiently, but this is my decision. It's my body, and I'm doing what I believe is right. Ultimately, her parents realized they couldn't stop her. But their disapproval lingered, casting a shadow over her relationship with them. On the morning of the surgery, her mother called her, tears evident in her voice. Amaka, she said, I still don't agree with this. But I'll pray for you. And I'll always love you. Thank you, Mom, Amaka replied, her voice cracking. I love you too. As Amaka entered the hospital, she carried the weight of her family's fears and disapproval. But her resolve never wavered. She knew the risks, the sacrifices, and the doubts swirling around her. Yet, in her heart, she believed she was making the right choice, one born out of love, hope, and an unshakable determination to save the man she loved. The days following the surgery were some of the hardest Amaka had ever faced. She woke in the hospital to a dull, persistent ache in her side, a reminder of the part of herself she had given away. The sterile scent of antiseptics filled the air as nurses moved in and out of her room, checking her vitals and administering pain medication. Kene visited every day, his face a mixture of gratitude and guilt as he watched her struggle through the recovery process. You didn't have to do this for me, he said softly one evening, sitting beside her bed. Amaka managed a weak smile. Yes, I did, and I'd do it again. The first week was the most challenging. Simple tasks like sitting up or walking a few steps left her exhausted and in pain. Her mother, still grappling with mixed emotions, stayed by her side, helping her with everything from eating to adjusting the pillows on her bed. Are you sure it was worth it? Ngozi asked one afternoon, her voice filled with concern as she watched Amaka wince while trying to sit up. Amaka nodded, her face pale but resolute. It was worth it, Mom. Kene is worth it. When she was finally discharged, Amaka returned to her small apartment, which now felt like an obstacle course. Each movement was a reminder of her limitations. She had to rely on others more than she ever had before. Kene, to his credit, was attentive in those early weeks. He would arrive every morning with fresh fruit or flowers, insisting on helping her with chores, despite her protests. You need to rest, he would say, gently taking the broom or pot from her hands. You're still healing. Amara appreciated his care, but the recovery process tested her patience and resilience. She missed the independence she once had, the ability to move freely without sharp pangs of pain slowing her down. There were nights when the discomfort and frustration became too much. She would sit in bed, tears streaming silently down her face as she clutched her side. On one of those nights, Kene found her like that, her sobs muffled into a pillow. Amaka, he said gently, sitting beside her, talk to me. I didn't think it would be this hard, she admitted, her voice shaking. I thought I'd bounce back faster. Kene reached for her hand, his grip firm yet tender. You've already done something incredible. Healing takes time. Don't be so hard on yourself. As the weeks turned into months, Amaka's strength slowly returned. She started with small victories, standing for longer periods, taking short walks around her neighborhood, and eventually returning back to work. Returning to work had been her decision, but it soon became clear that the recovery had taken more out of her than she anticipated. Simple tasks that used to excite her, brainstorming ideas, sketching layouts, and presenting to clients, now felt like monumental hurdles. Little did she know, the storm that lay ahead would challenge not just her body, but her heart and spirit in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The change in Kene was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. At the start, Amaka chalked it up to his own recovery and the adjustments they were both making post-surgery. She was happy to see him thriving. She believed in their love, in the sacrifice they had made for each other. But as weeks turned into months, the warmth that had once defined their relationship began to fade. It started with small things. Kene would cancel their plans at the last minute, claiming he was too tired or had work to catch up on. Amara didn't question it, understanding that he was still adjusting to life after the transplant. Kene started spending more time at work, often coming home late with vague excuses about work or needing space, snapping at her over small things. He stopped holding her hand, stopped looking at her the way he used to. One evening, as they sat in her apartment watching a movie, she reached out to hold his hand, a gesture that had once been second nature to them. But Kene pulled his hand away, pretending to adjust his position on the couch. Amaka frowned. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said curtly, not meeting her gaze.